I'm going to demonstrate one of the techniques for creating an Agateware pattern known as marbling. Marbling is showcased here in this vase, as well as in this soft slab here. Marbling is characterized by swirling bands and colors that ripple together like the stone known as marble. For your assignment, you will be getting 2 slabs of clay, a thicker slab of whiteware clay and a thinner slab of terracotta. For this demonstration, I'm going to cut these in half just so that I'm using a smaller amount of clay. As mentioned in the other video, we are going to be using the moisture of this fresh clay paired with compression behind the force of a rolling pin to bond the 2 clays together. We are going to start off with a fairly thick slab, and we will be doing some rolling, but it's really important that you do not roll any of your slabs too thin. Every time we compress the clay together, the pressure of the rolling pin will be squeezing the clay into a thinner sheet. If you start with your slabs of clay too thin, by the time you're done compressing them to get the clay to bond, you'll have slabs that are too thin to work with. So, watch how much strength you apply when you are rolling out the slabs. Marbling. I first am going to take my terracotta and somewhat roll it out. And when you roll with the rolling pin, change the direction of the pressure you apply to help stretch it in many different directions. I will oftentimes flip so that any wrinkles and cracks on the bottom of the slab also get rolled out and smoothed. The terracotta is very rich in iron and it does tend to stain, so you'll see a reddish mud sort of appear on your fabric. Don't worry about it. At the end of this project, we can rinse out our pieces of fabric so that it doesn't stain future projects. For marbling, it's going to be important that you stack several pieces of clay together. So I'm just making a guesstimate about these, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of make a sandwich of clay, and it will help if I apply just a little moisture, probably with a sponge. Tap a little moisture between them to ensure that they really stick and are soft enough to work with. So I've sandwiched, and here's where we're compressing. I'm going to kind of force it together with my hands, and I'm going to tamp it on the table to start the wedging process. The pressure I'm hitting it on the table with is also going to help bond those layers together and make them permanently stuck together. So the more that you work with your clay as you're hitting it on the table and it's reshaping itself, it's also reshaping the layers that you have here. And that's going to start to make it ripple together like that marbling effect that we're going for. You can also encourage the clay to change their pattern and marble together by taking the tool, like a wire cutting tool, slicing your clay. See those bands together and how they are now combined as one. And you can add them together, stacking them on top of each other or side by side. So I might take these and try to combine them together in some way by slicing them and reapplying them in the same manner as before. Alright, I'm picking up with the marbling technique, and I have sliced my block 3 or 4 times, reorienting it and turning it and sticking them back together, followed by some more tamping so that the clays bond together. I just want to say again the importance that I'm using moisture, a little moisture, to keep the clay very fresh and sticky, but it is not muddy, it's not dripping all over the surface. It's just damp to the touch and just a little bit sticky, so don't overdo it on the water. So I've got my block, and it's pretty thick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut several layers, lay them out on my work surface, and use the compression again with the rolling pin to bond them into one big slab. So I've taken this. I think I'm going to cut mine into about 3 layers because I want each layer to still be thick enough that I can compress it without it getting too thin. Depending on where you cut, you never know exactly what the pattern is going to be revealed because it's marbling and it is sort of out of our control. So I could lay these up side by side with a little moisture between and sort of press them snug up against the neighboring slab chunk. Press them up snug so that there's not gaps. And I kind of use my hands. And then follow up with a rolling pin, and the rolling pin, it's going to get messy, but the rolling pin's pressure, the compression, and the moisture is going to help the clay bond without needing to slip and score. But I got to really make sure that I'm pressing the clay together to encourage it to weld together as one unified piece of clay. Carefully reach underneath these slabs because they're still delicately bonded. Flip them upside down. See, I've got some gaps here, so I want to add a little moisture and really encourage the clay to snugly stick together. Follow up with the rolling pin to try and get them to bond together. We're going to work with these later, and we don't want any of our seams to break because we want our clay to be flexible enough to build something with it. So I warned you guys, don't over compress it, because just now rolling it, trying to get those slabs together when I started with a pretty thick slab, this has already gotten to about this thickness, which if you remember in class I usually advise you no thinner than one of your fingers, so that's a little thinner than one of my fingers, and I think that would be just right to build something with. You can see the clay has adhered to itself, the 2 colors, and the multiple pieces that I cut. I used moisture, pressure, and the rolling pin to make one big slab. So there we go. That would be a marbling technique, and I built something with it, and after it had dried a little bit, just a little bit to leather hard, shaving the clay when it's leather hard would allow me to take off some of the contamination on the outside and bring out the bright, vivid contrast of the 2 clays so that when that gray turns white, it'll really be spectacular. I'm just doing this as a demonstration now to give you an idea about how wonderfully bright it might look by the time you are done. That is marbling. No clear pattern, just swirls and undulating lines combined together.